Good morning, y'all. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, but we want to bring in our Facebook families as well. That way we can get everybody in here. And while you're thinking about it, if you like and share, it helps bring more Broncos fans into the chat so we can chat this morning. And yes, it is just me this morning. Apologies, but I think a lot of y'all that were in here early knew that already. Welcome in, everybody. This is Broncos for Breakfast. I will be your solo host today, Scott Kennedy. You can find me on the Twix and the various social media things at Scout Kennedy. Most of y'all know that already. It is good to see everybody this morning. It's game day. It's game day for the NFL. So hopefully your fantasy football drafts have gone to your liking and they will stay that way. Be interested to see what some of the sleeper picks and stuff are. Some of the guys that show out that people weren't expected. A lot of chatter in here in the chat already this morning. That is that's the main reason we go live is for y'all. So I will try and keep an eye on that and make sure that I'm not just talking about stuff that y'all don't want to talk about. Y'all might want to talk about Chiefs. You might want to talk about Raiders. Some of the things I wanted to get into this morning, though, was just some of the final predictions and some of the chatter going around the national media about the Denver Broncos as we head into the first week. So some of the things I wanted to talk about was Bill Barnwell did an article, did a long column. My God, it had to have been 15,000 words, basically on it was titled how all 32 teams can get to the Super Bowl, but that's not really how it was written. But it was really about the best case scenario for each team and how things can go right. And he had some very interesting things to say about the Denver Broncos. That was one of the things I wanted to get into. I wanted to get into the QB Power Index and see where Russell Wilson, some of the chatter around him from NFL.com. We've heard it all, y'all. We've heard the negative. He's gone. He's done. He's finished. To I think what I saw on NFL.com is fairly positive. So those are two of the things I want to hit. ESPN Plus had an interesting question I wanted to touch on. It says, which outcome is most likely? Russell Wilson bounces back or Gino Smith tanks? That was a pretty good conversation between Jeremy Fowler and Dan Graziano. I want to touch on that one a little bit. And then finally, we can get in on the NFL power rankings. Where are the Broncos right now? Where should they be? Where will they finish? Et cetera, et cetera. Nick and I did a season prediction for ourselves. I think we both came out at 11-6, but we both feel like 10-7 is more realistic for the whole. Looking at each game on an individual, I went 11-6. But should be a little different. So we don't need to rehash that, but we can if you want to. There might be some new folks in here, so we can. Now that I'm done monologuing, introducing the show, let's say hello to some folks that have been in here nice and early. Jeremy Sean says, good morning, Scott. Thanks for showing up for us. No, thank you for showing up, because if you're not here, I'm not here. I promise you that. Dr. Van Nostren, good to see you. It's been a few. That's Van Nostren. Don't have my glasses on. Can't see the A and the N. Says, good morning, Broncos country. What a better way to start the season with a KC loss tonight against the Lions, Raiders drama, and a Broncos win. Yeah, and if you're really into Travis Kelce might not even play. Of course, that factors into the Chiefs. So I guess we need to find something to pile on for the Chargers. They've been awfully quiet, haven't they? What's going on? What's going wrong with the Chargers right now? Kevin Gray says, morning, Nick and Scott. Yeah, Nick is out hiking. He does those really cool, I have to get permits for it and risk my life hikes, and he is out there this weekend. So I'm happy for him to get out there and get that done. Ethan, the DWI guy, is coming from London. I know how busy he's been, so it is great to see you. Welcome back, my friend. Good to see you. JD801, it's a newish name, not one of the regulars. Hopefully you can become one of the regulars, though. It's good to see you here in the morning. It says, good morning, Broncos fans. Let's go. Raiders week. Oh, I love the WEAK on Raiders week is here. Zach Power says, good morning with the coffee. Bama X, good morning, guys. Gatorade Gaming, good morning to you as well. String Guy, everybody. Dom, as Facebook started opening up, make sure you hit that likes. I got 4 likes on Facebook. George Fox, Michael Ranquillo, Dom Jaramillo, and Greg Smith. I know there's more people watching than that, and the more you hit the likes, the more people we can bring in, and then the more people y'all have to chat with while you're on Facebook. Good news. Gatorade Gaming comes in and asks a question about, with Chandler Jones out, we can focus on Crosby. This Chandler Jones thing, I'm not sure if it's as big a deal as people are making it out to be. He wasn't very good last year. frankly speaking. He's going to be 34 this year. I'm looking him up because some of the content providers, as soon as something happens, everybody has to write why it makes sense for X player to go to this team. And I looked at it and I'm like, he was really, really good 2 years ago. He'll be 34 this season. He played about 800 snaps and only had 5 sacks. He was rather ineffective and then finished with an injury last year. So the potential, the thought of Chandler Jones is scarier than actually what they got out of him, which is part of the reason why they didn't do as well as everybody was predicting last year. All those free agents that come in, they don't always hit the ground running. But yes, focus on Crosby. His splits are insane. They're insane. It's like 11 sacks against the Broncos, and the next highest team is 4. One of those is another divisional opponent. I think it was against the Chiefs, and then one of them was like the Bengals. You had 4 against the Bengals. But you play the Chargers twice, you play the Chiefs twice every year, and to have 3x the amount of sacks against the Broncos than any other team, you talk about Jacobs being a Broncos killer. No. It's this Crosby guy that should scare you more than Josh Jacobs, for goodness sakes. Philip Hogginson said, good morning, Scott. Good morning to you as well. Let's see. Michael Ranquillo coming in. Appreciate the stars and the support you always show us, Michael. He says, good morning, Scott. On Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos and Buckham. To you as well. Robot of Doom coming in on Twitch. One of our Twitch watchers. Love it. Good to see you. He says, good morning, Broncos country. Tyler Brooks says, good morning, Scott. Do you think this Broncos football team gets into the playoffs? Just how dangerous can Denver be? Dangerous. See, as soon as I heard it, it makes sense. When I study for tests or if I have to remember something, I say it out loud. I process things audioly better than visually. My brain runs. If I have to listen to it, I can concentrate. So when I heard dangerous, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's a nice play on words. Do I think the Broncos can make the playoffs? And let's get into this here real quick. This is one of the, and let me say hi to Gary. Gary starts flashing yellow super chats, grabs my attention like that. So as the banner says, super chats on YouTube and stars on Facebook. Support the channel and your favorite hosts. Well, maybe not even your favorite host, maybe like your 3rd or 4th favorite host. If I'm in there somewhere, me and Nick are in there somewhere. It doesn't just have to be your favorite. It could be one of your favorites. But he says, good morning, Scott and Broncos country. Good morning to you, Gary. Thank you very much for the support of the show, as always. Bill Barnwell, I referenced that article. And again, it was pretty amazing. I guarantee you this thing was a lot of words. It's an ESPN Plus article. He wrote it a couple days ago. I get it included with my Verizon account, or I probably wouldn't have it. So I'm thankful for those bundles. The FPI from ESPN, the Football Power Index, has the Broncos' chances of making the playoffs just 32.5%, which is a part of that is because of the division you're in and the conference you're in. I think he wrote at the top of that article, 14 of the 16 teams in the AFC have a chance to make the playoffs, the exceptions being the Texans and Colts. Ouch. So 33%. The odds of winning the Super Bowl are just 1.3%, but that puts you middle of the pack. That puts you 18%, or at number 18 overall in your Football Power Index. Now, there's a couple of quotes in here that I find interesting. This one is the one that I've been harping on about Sean Payton, why he impressed me so much. Wasn't Drew Brees. Sean Payton, who went blah, 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 including a 17-4 record over his final 3 seasons when one of Teddy Bridgewater, Taysom Hill, or Jameis Winston was a starting quarterback. He was 17-4 with those 3 quarterbacks. Don't tell me it was all Drew Brees, for goodness sakes. A lot of it has to do with the system. Not taking anything away from Drew Brees. Let's give a little bit more credit to Sean Payton. I see some hacks in there. I post a lot of Broncos stuff on my Facebook page, and I'm reading through the comments, and someone says, y'all are awfully excited about a coach that only got us 1 ring in blah, blah, how many years in 15 years that he was there. I'm like, dude, you only went to the playoffs 4 times in 40 years. What the hell are you talking about, man? Before he got there, have just a little bit of perspective. The other thing Bill says, there's a possibility Hackett to Payton will go down as the biggest upgrade by any team in any meaningful role this season. Does that sound familiar, y'all? Where have you heard that one before? The biggest upgrade for any team in any role. Hack it to Payton. We can look up me ranting about people wanting to worry about a first round pick for Sean Payton. Because yes, if you can have the biggest upgrade for any team and it only costs you a first round pick in the late 20s, yeah, that's an easy one. How good can this team be? I think we have to take a look at where can it go wrong. Everybody, I swear to God, if you're not focusing on a specific team, everybody says the same thing because they don't have the time to pay attention. Quarterback. I'm okay with that because as much as you put into getting Russell Wilson and as important to his team, he's not the first breaking point for me. The first breaking point on this team has been the last 2 years. This is my third year now covering the team, so we'll see going in. Offensive line. The offensive line has been broken the last couple of years. And if the offensive line does not get fixed, it doesn't matter. Russell Wilson doesn't matter. So the Denver Broncos put a lot, we want to use the word capital? Yes, this is a good time to use it. Resources/capital into fixing the offensive line. Mike McGlinchey got $52 million over 3 years. Ben Powers got 2 years at $29 million. Okay, I know their contracts are a little different. You can read 80. That's the functional value of their contracts. 3 years, $52 million. That's 17 a year. 17 a year for McGlinchey. 2 years and $29 million for Ben Powers. 15 a year. Then you're flexible on that. So yeah, there's bigger numbers, but they probably won't see all those numbers. So I'm talking about the functional value of this contract. You put a ton of money into it. Does that fix the offensive line? You hope. Does Lloyd Cushenberry go from bottom 5 to 15, 16 on the offensive line? If that happens, you're good to go. Now we can start worrying about what Sean Payton can do with Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson's going to be just fine, which brings me to the quarterback index. I want to point out a thing about their contract. We've talked about how a lot of the contracts on this team, not really including Russell Wilson's, the first eke of a chance you have to get out of his contract would be next year. But Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Garrett Bowles, Justin Simmons, big dollar Denver Broncos contracts that all have flexibility after this year. That said, some of that money could go to guys you already have in their contract. Mike McGlinchey's contract goes from a $6 million cap hit this year to 19 next year, 18.5. Ben Powers goes from 5 to 15 next year. I'm sure Zach Allen's is set up like that as a new signing as well, where it's much lower this year than it is this year than next year. So some of that money's already accounted for. So it's incredibly important that the offensive line has been addressed and is fixed. And the quarterback then plays closer to a level that you're paying him for. Because people that say that salary caps are a myth, yeah, wait until you've got some bad contracts on the books. George Payton has done a good job of keeping cap flexibility for this team, with the possible exception of Russell Wilson. So that's going to be important. Quarterback index. Nick Shook has taken over this particular column every week from Greg Rosenthal on NFL.com. And, just thinking where I'm wondering how far when I get to how long is it going to take me to scroll down to get to Russell Wilson? We've seen some low grades in there. So I was actually a little pleasantly surprised to see him come in at 12. And I'll drop this in the chat real quick if y'all want to read it. This is a free link. So let me put this in the chat. I like to make sure we're giving guys that, if we're going to aggregate content, the least we can do is make sure that we're helping to send traffic back their way, because, we're creating content off of the back of their work. So a thank you to Nick Shook and NFL.com. But he comes in at 12. for the quarterback index. And there's some stuff in here that we already know. 2022 was a complete disaster from Wilson. Everything with the QB in the Broncos was slow in his first year with the team. His movement, the relay, the play call, and time to the snap. Denver stunk, plain and simple. That part of the stuff will get fixed. How much time you're going to have at the line of scrimmage, the quickness of the play calling, that stuff's going to be fixed. Now, new coach Sean Payton has spoken with his chest about how things will be different. Yeah, that's kind of an understatement. Wilson shows up leaner. I expect he'll work better with Payton, a proven winner, than he did with Nathaniel Hackett, who was fired before last season even ended. That was the first time a coach had been removed before a season ended since 1978. The 49ers, I think I was reading this right. The 49ers were the team that did that in 78. You know who they hired? Bill Walsh. That worked out okay for the Niners. It did. So Russell Wilson comes in at number 12. What do you think about that going into the season? I honestly think going into the season, considering where he finished last year, that's a benefit of the doubt. That's a Madden rating. Hey, we have him as a 90 going in. He struggled horribly. He played like a 50, but we're only going to drop him to an 88. I think that's where you're hoping that 12 is if you said Russell Wilson had the numbers to make him the 12th best quarterback in the NFL, I might take it. I might take it right now. Can he do better than that? Yeah. Is the floor worse than that? We saw the floor. He's got to get off it. He's got to get off the mat, get a standing 8 count, and get going again. And Akey says 12 was a young Russ. Nope. 3 was a young Russ. I think he was considerably better than that. The chat has opened up. We are sitting at 100 and plus. We're knocking on the door. 200 people watching. Make sure you hit that like button. Some more people have heeded the call. Like Sheila Hermes, DeAndre Witherspoon, Alan Forster, Leo, Brandon Williams, Randy Thomas, Mike Katzenberger, Keith Brugman. Good to see y'all. And then David Cromwell coming in with a super chat. Thank you for the support, sir. He says, are the Raiders a more talented team than the Broncos? Hard to argue that they aren't. Well, that's a good question. Let me bring up, and this is a tougher question for me, honestly, because I don't know all of the rosters as well. I'm getting a whole lot better now that I've been doing this several years again. But, let's see. On paper, is Jimmy G a better quarterback than Russell Wilson? I don't think so. Wide receiver, I'm going yes. I would give the nod to wide receiver right now. Tight end, I would probably give the nod to wide receiver to the Raiders as well. If I'm talking about, let's see. Well, it's just Austin Hooper now. So what happened? Did they have an injury there? I thought, or did he leave? See, I told you I'm not as up on other teams. So you're killing me with this one, David. On the offensive lines, I know they have struggled mightily. Their tight end listed number 1 is Austin Hooper. So, would you take the Broncos tight ends over Austin Hooper, rookie Michael Mayer? There's a good question. Running back, I think I'd rather have Josh Jacobs right now, a more proven commodity. I think him and a healthy Javonte Williams are very, very similar. But Josh Jacobs, you kind of got to give them the nod too. So on offense, I'd say, yeah, maybe they are. Max Crosby, that's tough to beat out right now. The defensive line, I would give to the Raiders. Linebackers, I think I would probably, and then the back 7, I would give to, in a big way. I think this is the biggest discrepancy. I would probably give the back 7 on defense to the Denver Broncos. So, and where it counts the most, talent on the sidelines, Sean Payton versus Josh McDaniels. That's probably, again, if to quote Bill Barnwell one more time, just because I kind of like reading this, there's a possibility Hackett to Payton will go down as the biggest upgrade by any team in a meaningful role this season. Is Sean Payton to Josh McDaniels, Andy Reid's in the division too? Is that the biggest coaching mismatch that, in there? That might be the biggest mismatch of them all when we want to start up talking about talent and getting the most out of that talent. Sean Payton or Josh McDaniels? Come on. No offense to Raiders fans. I personally have nothing against Raiders fans. I know Broncos fans might feel very, very differently. Dude, I grew up in Atlanta. the Raiders were they're a long way from us. I don't particularly care. They haven't really been all that relevant in my lifetime. That was the 70s and early 80s since, the Raiders were a big deal. But I'm not a fan of Josh McDaniels. And I know Denver Broncos fans aren't. In fact, most Las Vegas Raiders fans probably aren't a big fan of him right now either. So number 12 on the quarterback index. I think that's with the talking point on this, I didn't even notice this until just now. You know who comes in at number 13? You want to trigger some Seattle Seahawks fans? Nick Shook has Geno Smith below. Let that sink in while I take a sip of coffee. He has Geno Smith below Russell Wilson. Would I have done that for this year? No, I wouldn't. Just because, I can get back to the question we have here. One of the questions I put out at the top, which outcome is the most likely? Russell Wilson bounces back or Geno Smith disappoints? That came from an ESPN Plus article that came from Graziano. Was it Graziano, Dan Graziano, and Jeremy Fowler? But they both agreed that they think Russell Wilson's more likely to bounce back because they think Geno Smith in that situation is more of a sure thing. I agree with that. Pete Carroll's a great coach. It's a stable environment up there. Geno Smith had a fantastic year that going in right now, I would agree with Seattle Seahawks fans that are a little pissed at that. I'd have Geno ahead of Russell right now. And I would reserve the right to change this on a week-to-week basis, which he will. But I would start the season with Geno Smith ahead of Russell Wilson. Let me get the chat here real quick. Wanted to get into to some of these. There's enough people in here. There's lots of good questions in here. Lafayette, let me see here. I don't like people coming in here, and he's not spamming the chat too bad, but keep it cordial, okay? Keep it cordial in here. Normally I can keep track of all of the chats. But just again, keep it cordial in here. I like having opposing views in a chat and a good conversation. But just remember, you are a guest in someone else's house when you come into a Broncos chat. I am too. So please act that way. Let's see here. One of the other things I want just getting into that discussion. And Fowler leads off. He says, let's go with Wilson's bounce back because I don't expect Smith to disappoint. Everything is set up for Smith to do it again in Seattle, including a strong supporting cast. And Graziano says, yeah, if these are the two choices, I agree. I think Wilson will play better than he did last year, almost because he has to. And I don't want to. Here's the big question that Broncos fans have, that the NFL has, that everybody has had since the day Sean Payton was hired. I'm not sure I agree with the phrase, and this is Dan Graziano saying, bounce back, because that would mean he plays the way he did in Seattle, and I'm not sure he ever reaches those heights again. I would say that's not necessarily true. Russ made a Pro Bowl as a declining Russell Wilson in his final year in Seattle, and everybody was saying, we told you, the Seahawks were saying, hey, thanks, Broncos. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for the draft picks. Thanks for taking them off our hands. We told you he was a decline. That wasn't a decline. A decline is gradual. That was a cliff. So you need him to bounce back to, even at the declining, which was like 26 touchdowns against 7 interceptions was what he had in his final year in Seattle. I think that's about right. Would you take that? Yeah, I'd be pretty happy with that, knowing that I want to be a power running team with play action, with a almost 4-1 touchdown to turnover, knowing I'm going to get some rushing yards in there too. Again, would you take the final year of Seattle, Russell Wilson, right now, if that was offered to you? Yeah, I probably would. I probably would take that one too. So not too bad. Look at this. I said we go about 30 minutes. We're at 25, and I feel like we're just getting warmed up in here. Power rankings. That was one more I wanted to get into. NFL.com has the Denver Broncos sitting at number 20. Again, I think that's fair. I've seen the Broncos down in the late 20s right now. And again, they talk a lot about the very similar thing. We can slice and dice this roster any way we want, but let's be honest, the season boils down to what Sean Payton and Russell Wilson do. Okay. On the whole, I think that's a factual statement. Because if Russell Wilson doesn't play well, you're in trouble. That's pretty much true for every single team in the NFL. If your quarterback stinks, you stink. Okay? So that's no big revelation there. So I think that's kind of cheating. Can Russell Wilson bounce back? Okay, maybe. But for me, this rebuild, this bounce back of the Denver Broncos starts in the trenches. It starts on the offensive line. The offensive line, I'll say it one more time. I've only said it 1,000 times in the last 8 months. If this offensive line does not improve and you've put enough resources into it that you have every reason to believe it will, it doesn't matter what Sean Payton and Russell Wilson can do. It doesn't matter. There's competency, there's okay, and then there's just being blown up in the middle of your offensive line and not allowing any time for your quarterback, any room. Latavius Murray looked like a hero because he could absorb the first point of contact 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Other guys weren't necessarily doing that. So 20, I think, is fair going in. I think we are all expecting better than that. Again, I have 10-7, 11-6. I think we're all expecting that. So that's another point. But 20 going in, I think that's fair. I don't see any big issues with that. So the early season press, the yelling and screaming, the highs and lows that we see through June, July, and August have settled in a little bit to, I think, that's a little bit more rational as we approach week 1. So let me get to some of the questions. Get some of the questions in here. Larry has a good point. He says, in my opinion, I think if Russell Wilson stinks, we might really have something with Jarrett Stidham. Oh, I don't know about that. I think Jarrett Stidham is a good back-end starter number 2 quarterback. I don't think he is a long-term franchise quarterback. I think if Jarrett Stidham is a bridge, if something happens to Russ, Jarrett Stidham, you're still going to be in the market for a quarterback of the future. And I think, unfortunately, you always will be if Jarrett Stidham is your quarterback. So I think he's more of a bridge type quarterback. He's a good insurance policy for Russell Wilson. What he does this year, he allows you to sit Russell Wilson if he needs to be sat for one reason or another, for lack of play. If any of these stories are true, and there's enough smoke to think that they are, that Russell Wilson and the offense are changing game plans around on a Thursday night, Sean Payton's benching his ass. I mean, that does not happen. That doesn't happen in high school, for God's sakes. That doesn't happen anywhere. If that happens, you sit him. You're going to sit this one out, kid. What happened? Oh, it's undisclosed injury. We're going to keep this one close to the chest as he needs a week off. Whatever, a sore ankle. He gets rolled up. It means I don't have to have him out there all the time. He's not the singular breaking point of this team because Jarrett Stidham is a much, much better backup option than Brett Rippon. And that's no offense to Brett Rippon. Man, that's just facts. Let me see here. Mike Young says, I hear that the Broncos don't have a good wide receiver. Why haven't the Broncos sought out a viable wide receiver in trade or free agency? Well, Mike, I think you've probably heard wrong on this one. Cortland Sutton is a good wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy is a burgeoning star. He's a rising star and could have his breakout year. Finished really well last year. I think if you start looking at, despite how things looked at the end of last year for passing, let's look and see where Jerry Jeudy's getting drafted. See what the fantasy world feels about Jerry Jeudy. Now, is he Devontae Adams? No. That's okay. There aren't many Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hills out there. And they did. They traded up to go get a wide receiver in the second round in Marvin Mims. So the Denver Broncos have put some resources into wide receiver. It's unfortunate that they lost Tim Patrick. But he didn't play last year. The guys that you're counting on this year are basically the same guys plus Mims that you counted on last year. And then Dulcich should be healthy. So I don't think weapons in the passing game, they don't really concern me. That if I'm going, okay, these are the keys to the Denver Broncos winning and going to the playoffs. It's going to take me a long time to get to to wide receiver. Long term, however, I'm with you. And we've said that. If there's one player, Scott, you're contradicting yourself. I get it. If there's one player, if there was an alpha, just an absolute top 5 guy on this field, not counting quarterback, where would you put him? Nick and I have said edge and wide receiver. Edge is kind of an easy one for me. They're just such a difference maker. Having a top 5 wide receiver on this team, could Jerry Jeudy become that guy? Maybe. He maybe, but they have attempted. My point on this is more, they have attempted to address the wide receiver position. Now it's a matter of getting a return on investment, including Marvin Mims, including Jerry Jeudy. And then hopefully Cortland Sutton can come back. Last year was just kind of a weird year. They were spamming him the ball the first couple games, and then they ignored him when everybody started rotating their coverage. And we talk about in-game adjustments, feed the hot hand, do this. The week-to-week adjustments were pretty horribly bad for Nathaniel Hackett. It's like, we didn't get the balls to the running backs in week 1. So the first 15 passes go to the running backs. You can't make this stuff up, man. It's unbelievable. Let me see here. And Jerron Washington says, a lot of people are forgetting that Russ was playing better after Nathaniel Hackett was fired, and that's why I believe in Russ. Yeah. Again, the Broncos played a lot better. I've already forgotten the gentleman's name. He was a breath of fresh air, though, wasn't he? Jerry something. Apologies. Getting old. The long-term memories take longer to sink in and stick. I can name you, 10 coaches from 1980, but can't name a guy that I saw 2 months ago. They did play better, and everybody saw it, and they had every reason to tank, to not play better. Guys looking after themselves or contracts. There wasn't a draft pick, but the players aren't interested in the draft pick. That's more of a front office thing. The players, towards the end of the year, when they say they quit on a guy, they're interested in taking care of themselves. They're interested in being healthy and outlasting a guy and a fresh start the next year. They had that opportunity, and they played hard. They played hard towards the end of last year. Keith Brugman says, and this is a good point, he says, players on the O-line have been stating this group, the offensive line, you've heard them say, including Lloyd Cushenberry, this group needs to lead the team. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. To be the type of team that Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos want to be, it starts on the offensive line. Every move they made, with the possible exception of Marvin Mims, was about getting better in the running game and against the running game. That was pretty much every single move they made in the offseason. You can go to Chris Manhertz. You can go to McGlinchey, Powers, Zach Allen. It kept going. It's like this team needs to be tougher. And that's what we kept saying. Let me see here. Let me go down and get towards the end here because we're going to wrap it up here pretty soon. Let me see. I want to get to Kyle. Kyle's coming in. He says, appreciate you coming on Facebook. He says, I'm excited for the creativity and screenplays from Sean Payton. We've been so bland and boring on offense since Manning retired. Kyle, this one scares me. Getting the balls to your backs in a quick passing game through screenplays, little dump offs, little arrow routes, little option routes out of the back is a staple in a Sean Payton offense. Look up Alvin Kamara's reception totals. He was 80 plus 4 years in a row. That's incredible for a running back. I don't know if this team can run a screen. They're going to keep doing it. We saw, how many times do we see them try it in the preseason? Now, it wasn't your starters all the time. I just worry about the lack of mobility in this offensive line to get out wide. I want to see Mike McGlinchey. I want to see Quinn Miners. I want to see Lloyd Cushenberry on the right side. The left side, I'm not sure that Ben Powers and Garrett Bowles are the guys to run them left. But to the right side, I have a little more hope. And then you don't want to be too obvious. But in the preseason, we saw, here's the screen pass. There's nobody that's been able to get out there in front of the back in time. And the offensive lineman is showing up just in time to help the running back off the ground. That bothers me. To me, that's a deficiency. That is something when you say, what would you like to do that you can't? Effective screenplays. So we'll see. It's a staple in a Sean Payton offense. I love a well-run screenplay. I think seeing 900 to 1,000 pounds of offensive linemen leading a running back into the back seven of a secondary is diabolical. I think it is fun watching those poor guys dive out of the way, doing their best just to get around that wall of beef that's going out there. So we will see. And I think it was Jerry Rosberg. Yeah, all I could think of is I wasn't sure. I was like, wait, wasn't he the owner of the Bulls or something? So again, 80s brain, 90s brain. But Jerry, yeah, he did. He was a. It's nice as you get older, you realize, man, it doesn't. I can just say what I think. It doesn't matter. I'm old. Who cares? He kind of had that last year. I can say what I want to. What do you do? Fire me? I don't care. I was retired before you brought me back. So what? I'll say what's on my mind. I loved it. He was definitely a breath of fresh air. And Paul Humphrey says 13 million to a wide receiver that hasn't played in 2 years. Sorry, but that does affect our wide receiver room. Let's stop blowing smoke. Broncos fans, Sutton isn't worth 17 million. Let me see. Because I don't disagree with you at all. And Sutton has got to play into something close to that. But last year, Sutton was right around, I don't remember the exact numbers, but his yardage and his pay rate last year were with like plus or minus 5. So he was like the 21st receiver in yardage, and he was like the 18th highest paid receiver. So last year, the value, while you didn't get what you were hoping from Courtland Sutton, the value from a purely a number standpoint wasn't that far off. This year, however, you're talking about, as you said, Paul, an $18 million wide receiver. You need to get more, and you can't do anything about that this year because his contract is set for next year. His dead cap is $25.5 million, so you couldn't move on from him this year. However, next year, his dead cap goes to 7.5 on a cap hit of 17. So yeah, if he doesn't play like a $20 million wide receiver, you're not going to have him. And frankly, you're not going to have 3 8-figure wide receivers anyway. Tim Patrick, sorry, his contract, you're moving on from that contract. Courtland Sutton, it's up to him. It's up to him this year. If he plays like a $20 million wide receiver and you're talking 1,200 yards and knocking on the door of double-digit touchdowns, you're happy to pay $18 million next year against a $7 million cap hit. You might do an extension. You might do a rework it where you can get some of that money back and free up some space. But you're right. He needs to play that way. He needs to play as an $18 million wide receiver. And if he does, you're happy to extend him. We talk about why don't they just rework his contract? Why don't they just restructure it? Because you can't just restructure it. You've got to have some leverage or the willingness to put more years on it to restructure it. The last thing you want to do right now with Russell Wilson is add more years to it. Right now, you're looking to see just how quickly you can get out from under it if he fails. Yeah, and that was Jerry Reisendorf. We're talking about the Chicago Bulls. Let me see. But when you're going live and you hear, Jerry and R in your head, you're afraid to say the name. It's just easier to say. On that note, y'all, let me see. I think I got everybody. No, I didn't. How did I miss Jasmine? Jasmine comes in with a super chat. How did I miss Jasmine? Apologies. Let me take care of this. Jasmine says, Scott, I was watching some of Russ's film last season and preseason. Do you think Sean Payton will ask him to get the ball out more quickly to compensate for the iffy offensive line? That is such a good question. The second game in the preseason, when the starters played, was the whole first half, it was more than people were expecting, that's for sure. There was good words about Russell Wilson and how he played, and that was because of how he played on the fly, how he improvised. It was more like the Russell Wilson that you got used to seeing. The questions I had, and we can go back and watch it. I'm not restating history here. Well, actually, I am restating history. I'm not rewriting history here. Is I didn't see any drop back set and throws. I didn't see the ball coming out quickly. I saw a quick release after buying time and rolling out and trying to scan for broken play yardage. When I did see that, Jasmine, though, I did see it in week 3 when the offensive line gave Jarrett Stidham plenty of time. to go option 1, option 2, option 3. And typically, if a quarterback, you can watch college, you can go down to the college level. If you see a college quarterback take a 5-step drop, plant that back foot and throw all in one motion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bang, it is a completion 90% of the time. It's just first read. So the question is, can you recognize who's going to be your first read other than just being told this play, this is our first read? Because it changes look to look. If they're in this type of, if they're, normally my first read might be Jerry Jeudy in the slot coming on a slant. Okay, they're pressing him. They've got inside leverage with a linebacker. I'll get him killed if I throw a slant. So what would be my first read? Next best option. That's going to be my first read pre-snap. How well does Russell Wilson recognize that? How well can the offensive line hold up to initial pressure? Because last year they didn't. The Cushenberry and Reisner were in the lap of Russell Wilson after the snap. And that's what I want to see. I want to see those 3-step drops and bang, 5-step drops and bang, those first reads. That's what makes an efficient offense. The broken play is no way to run an offense. That's what makes Russell Wilson from good to great, is his ability to improvise. That's what makes Patrick Mahomes elite. But if you can't play within the structure of an offense, you can't play. So, yes, he's going to try and have him get the ball out more quickly. Yes, getting to the line of scrimmage and surveying the field and those options are going to be a big part of that. You can't do that when the crowd is counting down the play clock as you are approaching the line of scrimmage. You can't survey the defense and start saying, okay, this is what I want to do. So, great question, because it's a question that has to be answered by the Broncos. And we will find out a lot more about it this year. So I'm looking forward to it. It's Sean Payton's strength. Can the Broncos execute? This is one of the true times when you hear coaches say, we didn't execute, execution. This time I'm actually on board with that. But it's not about, do they make a mistake? It's can they? Can they? Are they physically capable of executing a screenplay? Is Russell Wilson the type of quarterback who can 3-step drop and throw, 5-step drop and throw? We're going to find out. I promise you that. On that note, we are just about to get out of here. And I got my closer coming in for me. I call him the big righty. He grew up playing ball in the upper Midwest and has gone overseas to hone his craft, but I brought him back to be my closer. Ethan, the DWI guy, is coming in bright red. $100 super chat. Thank you, my friend. He says, great show, Scott. Okay, leading wide receiver for Denver in week 1. I would want to say Jeudy, but I think he's just niggled up a little bit because I think Jeudy is my receiver for the year. I'll go Courtland Sutton on this. I'm going to go with the veteran. It's a tough call because there are a lot of options here. Marvin Mims, I think it's a little too soon. Javonte Williams, I don't know that he'll get the snaps. Dulcich, we'll see. So I think it comes down to Courtland Sutton is going to be your guy this year. That's what I think. What happens, we'll see. We'll see. My guy for the year is Jerry Jeudy. I think Jerry Jeudy breaks 1,000 yards and is right around 10 touchdowns for this year. And you're happy to pick up his it's already been picked up, but you're happy to pay his option and talk to him about a long-term extension going into next season. So thank you, my friend. I want to thank everybody that contributed to the show. Made it a fast 45 minutes this morning. There's football tonight. The priests are on tonight. They will be on during the show, so make sure you're here for Mile High Huddle. And then Friday morning, make sure you're hitting tomorrow morning, the Legends of Mile High. If you want to talk more football with me, I will be on my channel, youtube.com/Scott Kennedy. I will be back at 9 a.m. We'll talk some Lions, Chiefs. We'll talk some of the big storylines heading into the weekend. And then Monday, Nick and I will be back to recap week one football. So Gary, David, Jasmine, Ethan, thank you so much for the super chats. Michael, I'm sure you're there too on stars. If I didn't get to say thank you, or hopefully I got to show your stars comment, hit me up. I'll make sure to make it up to you next time we're on if I didn't. But that's what I've got for today. I had a great time with y'all this morning. Hopefully Nick will be safe. Hopefully y'all have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.